The tower called me Northstar before my husband had finished explaining why I didn't need to be nervous. Grant Mercer had one hand on the throttle and the other resting lightly near the controls, perfectly at ease in the left seat of his own jet. He was good enough to make confidence look quiet, which was one of the reasons I had let him believe for 3 years that flying unsettled me more than it did. Departure, Mercer 7 ready at 27, he said. A burst of static answered. Then the controller's voice changed. Mercer 7, hold position. Northstar, confirm you're aboard. My hand tightened around the edge of the seat before I could stop it. Grant turned his head. What did he call you? I should have stayed silent. Instead, instinct beat fear by half a second. I leaned toward the spare mic, Northstar aboard. The words came out in the old cadence, clipped and clean. The tower answered immediately. Northstar confirmed. Stand by. Grant stared at me, not because I had spoken to air traffic control, because I had sounded like I belonged there. Evan, keep your eyes outside. You just answered the tower by call sign, and you're still on an active taxiway. His attention snapped back outside. He resumed the checklist, but the rhythm had changed. Brakes. Set. I answered before realizing he had not asked me. Grant's hand stopped. You know the checklist. I've heard you do it enough times. In order. You're very repetitive. I prefer thorough. That's the wealthy version of repetitive. Under any other circumstances, he would have smiled. This time, he looked at me for 1 second too long, then keyed the radio. Departure cleared us to taxi, and we rolled toward the runway beneath a gray morning sky. Grant did not ask another question until we were airborne. I appreciated that. Flight safety had always been the one thing I could count on him to place above curiosity, ego, or money. At 10,000 feet, he engaged the autopilot and turned toward me. Northstar. Hearing it from him was worse. The call sign had belonged to a version of me I had spent years making sure never entered our marriage. It's old. How old? Old enough that the tower shouldn't have used it. That was not an answer. It was the one I have. His expression tightened. Grant was not controlling by nature. He was procedural. He liked variables named, checked, and placed where they belonged. I had spent our marriage making myself easy to categorize around airplanes. Tense passenger, avoidant spouse, someone who preferred trains when possible. Useful categories. Safe ones. He looked back at the panel. You corrected my mixture setting last month. It was obvious. This aircraft doesn't have a mixture control. I blinked. He glanced over. That was a test. You're unbearable. You passed. I almost laughed. Then the weather display updated. A narrow band of convective activity had built faster than forecast along our route, and regional traffic was already beginning to fan around it. Grant leaned closer to the screen. That cell wasn't there 20 minutes ago. I looked once and felt old reflexes wake up before I could bury them. Don't take the western deviation. His eyes moved to me. Why? Wind sheer on the back edge. The return looks cleaner than it is. There's no advisory yet. There will be. Ask for 20 right. He held my gaze for a beat, then keyed the mic. Departure approved the deviation. Less than 2 minutes later, another aircraft behind us reported moderate to severe shear on the western edge of the same cell. Grant glanced from the radio to me. That was an oddly specific guess. I contain multitudes. You contain weather radar interpretation. Among other disappointments. The humor died with the next transmission. Mercer 7, traffic advisory and routing update. Northstar, advise if you require alternate corridor. Grant's hand froze over the panel. This time, the tower was not merely recognizing me. They were asking me for operational preference while Grant was pilot in command. Why are they talking to you? He said quietly. I knew enough to be afraid of the answer. Tell them standard routing is fine. You tell them. Grant. They asked you. The cockpit suddenly felt too small. Years ago, people had asked me for decisions in exactly that tone. Calm, professional, trusting. One voice had depended on mine. One person had not come home. The memory arrived as sensation before image. Headset pressure, rain hammering glass, someone saying my name like I could fix an impossible choice. I pulled my hand back from the mic. Standard routing is fine. Grant studied me, and whatever he saw finally convinced him this was not stage fright. He answered the tower himself. For the next several minutes, neither of us spoke. The danger passed, but the marriage did not reset with it. By the time we leveled above the weather, Grant was no longer treating me like a frightened passenger. He was watching me like a pilot watches an instrument that has started giving information he does not understand. I'm not going to interrogate you in the air, he said. Thank you. That was not reassurance. I know. But when we land, I need the truth. I looked out at the cloud tops. You may not like it. I'm starting to care less about that. A soft chime sounded from the avionics console. The flight management system had received an automatic data update from departure control. Grant opened it. I saw the identifier before he finished reading. Northstar, legacy operational call sign, status, archived. His eyes moved slowly to me. Archived what? I did not answer. He opened the attached reference. Most of the record was restricted, but one line remained visible beneath my name. Professional flight operations. Credential history terminated following incident review. Grant read it twice. Then he looked back at me, all the easy certainty gone from his face. You weren't afraid of flying when I met you. I swallowed. No. You were afraid of something that happened while you were doing it. The tower crackled again before I could respond. Mercer 7, Northstar status confirmed. Grant's eyes stayed on mine. Whatever Northstar had been, the system still remembered him. And now so did my husband. Grant kept the aircraft steady for another 6 minutes before the first real consequence of Northstar reached us. His company operations line pinged through the cockpit display, not with a routine update, but with a privacy alert. Someone had queried the archived identifier. Attached to my name. Twice. The first request came from departure. The second came from the National Aviation Review Board. Grant read the notice once and muted it before another message could populate. That fast, I said. You sound surprised. I was hoping bureaucracy had improved. It has. It found you in under 10 minutes. I did not smile. Whatever had happened in the first hour was no longer contained inside our cockpit or our marriage. The system had noticed Northstar again, and the storm line was causing enough regional disruption that archived operational networks were being queried more aggressively than usual. Grant glanced at the weather, then at me. We're 35 minutes from landing. I'm not asking for your history while we're still responsible for an aircraft. Almost disappointingly reasonable. Do not confuse discipline with lack of questions. A routing amendment arrived. Traffic was being pushed toward a narrower northern corridor. Grant began loading it. I watched the wind layer update. Don't accept that altitude through the north segment. His fingers stopped. Reason. Mountain wave on the lee side. Not dangerous at cruise, but ugly on descent with those winds. He checked the forecast and found nothing current enough to settle it. No report yet. There will be. He looked at me for half a second, then requested a lower crossing. For minutes later, another jet reported severe turbulence exactly where we would have entered. Grant no longer called it a guess. You've done this before. Yes. It was the first answer I gave him without trying to make it smaller. Commercial? Not exactly. Military? No, charter. I looked at him. You said you weren't interrogating me. I am observing a rapidly expanding definition of restraint. Despite myself, I almost laughed. Then the operations display chimed again. Northstar record. Authenticated professional flight history. Access limited. One line was visible beneath the restriction. Special Operations Civilian Command Qualification. Grant's face changed. Special Operations? Civilian. That word is doing a lot of work. It usually does. He did not press further. Instead, he adjusted the airflow vent away from my face and lowered the cabin temperature slightly. One of the dozen quiet things he had learned to do because he thought flying frightened me. The kindness felt different now. Do you want to continue to destination? He asked. Not should we. Do you want? I looked at the storm track. Pine Ridge sat closer on our amended route, outside the worst of the building cells, with a longer runway and better ground support than our original destination if the weather kept deteriorating. Pine Ridge, I said, before the regional holds get worse. Grant nodded and requested the diversion. We spent the rest of the flight working with an ease that made the hidden years between us feel almost absurd. He flew. I monitored weather movement, read one amended clearance when his attention was elsewhere, and caught a frequency change before he had to ask. No performance. No contest. Just two people doing what needed doing. When we landed at Pine Ridge, both our phones filled with missed calls. Mine should not have. The number was unlisted. 3 came from aviation offices. 1 contact read review board. Another notice arrived through the aircraft system before I could open any of them. Northstar legacy record match confirmed. Incident history available to authorized requester. Grant saw it first. Do you want me to open it? I should have said no. Instead, the sight of my old call sign sitting there like it had never stopped belonging to me made avoidance feel smaller than it had an hour ago. Header only. He did exactly that. My former credentials populated first: flight hours, operational qualifications, command authority. Then the final line loaded. Last active command. Incident 47N. Fatality recorded. Grant went still beside me. He did not touch the rest of the file. He did not ask who died. His restraint hurt more than pressure would have. I stared at the word fatality until the old cockpit returned in pieces. Rain across glass, alarms, a voice trusting me to choose, and the knowledge that one person had not come home. Grant closed the record without being asked. Evan. I kept looking straight ahead. Northstar wasn't the part one was. Hiding from you. His voice softened. I know. For the first time, he did not sound like a pilot trying to solve the problem. He sounded like my husband realizing the problem had been living beside him for years. Grant did not open the rest of Incident 47N. The review board opened it for us. My phone lit on the center console less than a minute after we shut down at Pine Ridge, and this time the message was not a request. Formal record access initiated. Northstar Legacy Review. They can pull your incident file without your permission? Grant asked. They can review archive command records if a legacy identifier becomes active again. Because the tower used your call sign. Because I answered it. The system had not merely recognized Northstar. I had confirmed him. A second notification appeared. Limited record release authorized. My name. Former certification. Special Operations Civilian Command Authority. Then the flight history. Grant read quietly. 4,800 command hours. Mountain rescue. Severe weather. Emergency diversion authority. He turned toward me. Evan, you weren't just a pilot. No. And you let me explain crosswind correction to you for 2 years. You seemed happy. His mouth almost moved. The humor died when the next line appeared. Incident 47N. Cascade system failure during medical evacuation. Command decision attributed to Northstar. 1 fatality. 6 persons recovered. My hands went cold. Grant reached toward the screen and stopped. Do you want it closed? I stared at 6 persons recovered. That number had not lived in my memory. The one had. No, the board released a partial operational summary. We had been flying a medical evacuation through deteriorating weather when a hydraulic failure cut our options. One route led toward a short field through rising terrain. The other meant continuing toward a longer runway while the system degraded. I had chosen the longer runway. You maintained command after the failure, Grant said. Yes. And the aircraft landed. Yes. He let the silence stand instead of forcing the chronology into something easier. An audio index appeared next, my old call sign beside every. Command transmission. Northstar, 6 times in 14 minutes. Grant sat back. You left aviation after this? Yes. Voluntarily. Yes. Hurt crossed his face now, not because of Northstar. 3 years, Evan. You let me reroute vacations, cancel trips, talk you through turbulence like you'd never seen weather before. I know. I thought I knew what scared you. His voice stayed controlled. Right now I don't know which fears were yours and which ones you handed me to manage. The cost of my silence had finally found language. I had let him build care around information I knew was incomplete. The fear was real, I said. Just not the version you thought. That doesn't make the distinction small. No, before we could go further, 2 review board staff entered with a local operations manager. Evan Hayes, the lead reviewer, asked. We need a statement regarding this morning's tower exchange and confirmation that you do not intend to reactivate legacy privileges. Not here, Grant said automatically, then stopped and looked at me. The correction mattered. Formal request only, I said, and no interview until I agree to one. The reviewer nodded. We'll send it. She left a final notice. Northstar's archived status was now flagged for active verification across the regional system. My anonymity had become administrative history. Grant waited until the door closed. Do you want counsel involved? Only if I ask. Okay. We returned to the incident file because there was no pretending it would stay buried. Grant opened a technical appendix. There's a discrepancy. My stomach tightened. What kind? Your summary says the command decision resulted in 1 fatality. The preliminary review doesn't call the decision negligent. It says outcome under alternate routing was undetermined. He enlarged the next line. Alternate course, terrain and weather risk, model incomplete. For years, my memory had reduced the flight to one equation. I chose, and Daniel died. The record refused to be that simple. This doesn't say you made the wrong call, Grant said. It doesn't say I made the right one either. No, but those are not the same thing. One final metadata line appeared. Alternate outcome model, sealed pending final review. Grant's voice softened. Was there ever a final review? My chest tightened before I answered. I never stayed long enough to see it. By the time Grant and I reached a private conference room at Pine Ridge, the reassessment had frozen my old privileges and placed Incident 47 in under active board custody. I had not used those credentials in years, but seeing frozen still felt like a door locking. They froze something you weren't using, Grant said. Institutions enjoy symbolic efficiency. You're making it funny because it hurts. I gave him a look. You've had one morning of new information. Don't become unbearable. Too late. Outside our room, the same storm line that forced our diversion was producing holds and reroutes across the region. Northstar had returned on a day when aviation systems were already talking to one another more than usual. The reviewer from the FBO entered with a sealed tablet. The reassessment found an inconsistency between your preliminary incident summary and the final modeling archive, she said. You found the alternate course model. We confirmed it exists. Full release requires authorization from the surviving command parties. I was pilot in command. You resigned before the review closed. You still have standing, but not unilateral release authority. Grant leaned forward. Who else? The board, the medical transport operator, the insurer, and the estate representative for Daniel Cross. Hearing Daniel's name spoken 20 feet from an active runway made the past feel obscenely current. Daniel Cross, 32, relief pilot, calm voice, terrible coffee, a daughter who had just learned to ride a bike, rain against the windshield, hydraulic pressure dropping. Daniel saying, your call, Northstar. Then silence later, where his voice should have been. Grant's hand moved toward mine and stopped. Do you want me here? Not do you need me. Do you want me? I nodded once. He stayed. The final model was completed 6 weeks after the incident. The reviewer continued. The record shows 3 attempted contacts with you. I remembered all 3, 2 unopened. Messages and 1 certified envelope I returned without signing. I had called it self-preservation. Now it looked a lot like refusing evidence that might complicate my punishment. What can you release now? I asked. She opened a partial route analysis. 2 paths appeared. The longer runway I chose and the short mountain field option I had spent years imagining as the decision that would have saved Daniel. The reconstructed weather changed everything. Convective cells had shifted faster than forecast. Wind shear increased near the mountain field. Terrain margins tightened as the hydraulic system degraded. That wasn't in the preliminary report. The dataset was incomplete at the time. Risk markers populated the mountain route. Terrain proximity, severe turbulence, progressive control degradation. Then a projection made my throat close. Total hydraulic loss likely before approach. This still doesn't prove my route was right. No, Grant said. I wanted him to offer something easier. He knew better. And I'm not going to tell you one person didn't matter because 6 survived. Daniel mattered. The loss mattered. What the evidence was taking away was not grief. It was certainty that grief proved guilt. The reviewer closed the partial model. If you authorize us to contact Daniel's estate, we can request accelerated release of the full analysis. That meant reopening a door I had spent years avoiding and involving the family of the man whose death I had built my life around. Grant stayed out of the decision. Send the request, I said. As the reviewer left, a regional weather advisory flashed on the wall display. Multiple aircraft were being rerouted around the same mountain corridor. Grant noticed it too, but neither of us spoke about it. There were already enough ghosts in the room. He looked back at the alternate route. Evan, the story you've been living with may not be the one the data supports. I stared at the red risk markers. I know. That frightened me more than blame ever had. If I had not destroyed Northstar by making the wrong decision, then I had spent years disappearing for a reason the evidence might no longer allow me to keep. Later that afternoon, after Daniel Cross's estate authorized release, the board opened the complete alternate outcome model. The first thing I saw was a number I had never allowed myself to imagine. Estimated survivability on the mountain route, 12%. I read it twice. Grant stayed quiet. The model broke the old flight into probabilities, system degradation, terrain clearance, wind shear, and timing. Cold language for a night I remembered in fragments. The short field I had spent years turning into the road not taken would have put us into worsening mountain turbulence, with hydraulic pressure collapsing before final approach. The longer route I chose had given us time, runway, emergency crews, and 6 survivors. Daniel had died after a damaged restraint assembly in the medical compartment failed during the final descent, underloads no one had detected in time. Not because I chose the longer runway. I stared at that line until the letters blurred. "There's more," Grant said quietly. The final review included a cockpit audio excerpt I had never heard after the accident. Daniel's voice came through first beneath alarms. "Hydraulics trending down. Short field puts us inside terrain before we know what control we'll have." My younger voice answered. "Long runway gives us 14 more minutes." Daniel said. "And 14 minutes for the system to get worse." "I know." A pause. Then the words I had remembered for years. "Your call, Northstar." I had always heard accusation in them afterward. The recording continued. Daniel added something my memory had erased completely. "I'm with you." I stopped breathing. The next sound was my own voice, choosing the longer runway. Then Daniel again, almost immediately. "Good call." 2 words. That was all. 2 words I had spent years not knowing existed. Whatever Grant saw in my face kept him from offering comfort too quickly. "Evan, don't tell me it wasn't my responsibility." I wasn't going to. I looked at him sharply. "You were pilot in command," he said. "It was your responsibility." The honesty hurt, which was probably why I believed him. Daniel still died. Yes. I chose the route. Yes. My throat tightened. Then how? Is this supposed to change anything? Grant sat across from me rather than beside me, leaving space. Because responsibility and fault are not the same thing. I looked away. You made a decision with bad systems, bad weather, incomplete information, and people depending on you. The final review says the alternative was almost certainly worse. Almost. Yes. Almost. No fake certainty. No miracle absolution. You don't have to stop grieving him just because the evidence says you made the best available choice. It landed harder than if he had called me innocent. Innocence had never been the thing I wanted. I wanted a world where doing everything right guaranteed everyone came home. Aviation had taught me that world did not exist, and I had punished myself for learning it. The board summary kept scrolling. Final determination. Command judgment consistent with emergency standards. No pilot error found. I had never been grounded. Never formally blamed. Never professionally declared unfit. I had resigned before anyone could tell me the verdict I had already passed on myself was not the one the evidence supported. Grant read the line and then looked at me. "You left before the review finished." I thought I knew what it would say. "You thought you deserved what you imagined it would say." I hated how accurate that was. "Careful. You married me. You knew I was occasionally annoying." I thought that was billionaire confidence. Mostly excellent breeding. I almost laughed, but Daniel's voice was still sitting between us, so the moment passed quietly. Grant's expression changed. "I'm still angry." I looked at him. "About Northstar?" "No. About how completely you decided for both of us what I was allowed to know." The sentence found the exact place I could not defend. "I thought if you knew, you'd start asking me to become that man again. And instead you let me build part of our marriage around protecting someone you knew I didn't fully understand." He looked down at his hands. "I don't know how long it's going to take before I stop wondering whether I'm responding to what you actually feel or to what you think is safest for me to believe." I had no defense. Worth giving him. "That's fair." "I don't want fair. I want true." Silence settled between us. Finally, I said, "When we met, you thought I hated flying. Then you started choosing trains when you could. You booked larger cabins. You warned crews about turbulence. You made sure I never had to sit near a cockpit unless I wanted to. I thought I was helping. You were." He frowned. "By misunderstanding you. By giving me a life where no one asked me to make the call." There it was, the truth beneath Northstar and the accident. I let you think I was fragile because fragile people don't get handed other people's lives. Grant absorbed it without trying to fix it. So every time I protected you from flying, I let you protect me from being needed. His face changed, grief crossing the anger. I don't know what to do with that yet. Neither do I. Good. Good. For once, I'm not going to solve it before you decide what it means. His phone vibrated before either of us could answer. Pine Ridge Operations had pushed a regional advisory to every aircraft and company center on the field. The storm line had worsened. Multiple diversions were already in progress, and one medical charter west of Granite Pass had reported unreliable navigation and intermittent radio contact. Grant turned the screen toward me. I read the aircraft type, the weather track, the corridor, and knew too quickly where their options would collapse first. He saw recognition in my face. You know this setup. Not this flight. But the problem. I nodded. Northstar had stopped being a mystery. The larger problem was what came after knowing I had not failed. Somewhere beyond the hangar windows, another crew was running out of easy options, and for the first time in years, hiding from responsibility no longer felt like the safest choice. The midpoint did not make me feel lighter. It made every excuse heavier. For years, I had called leaving aviation responsibility. If I stayed away, I could never make another decision that ended with somebody dead. The final review had taken that logic apart, and outside the conference room the same storm was turning ordinary flights into bad choices. Grant's operations center patched in a regional advisory. A medical charter diverting around the weather had lost reliable navigation data and was making intermittent radio contact through relay aircraft. They had not declared an emergency yet. Pilots often waited until they had exhausted every better word. I stood over the weather display before anyone asked me to. Grant noticed. He did not say Northstar. What do you see? I zoomed the map. Their diversion clears the cells, but not the terrain if the winds strengthen. Pine Ridge. Possible. Not on the published arrival. Grant's chief operations pilot joined the secure line. Mercer, company traffic is holding north and the med charter is west of Granite. Tower needs verified winds. Grant looked at me. Evan. The old reflex rose. Don't become necessary. I ignored it. Stop planning around the published approach. The valley wind is channeling southeast. If they come through Granite at current altitude, they'll get pushed toward rising terrain. A pause. Who was that? Grant kept his eyes on me. Someone with the weather picture. Listen to him. What do you recommend? Actual surface winds from South Ridge and Lake County. Then build them in Eastern Corridor if they can hold altitude. Another voice came onto the frequency. Northstar. My chest tightened. Grant reached toward mute, then stopped. Want me to shut that down? No. Leave it. We worked from the conference room instead of a cockpit, and that difference mattered. I was not flying. I was not suddenly healed. I was choosing one piece of responsibility at a time. Grant coordinated. I tracked weather and terrain. Once he started telling me which data stream to open, caught himself, and changed it to, what do you need? You're adapting suspiciously fast. I have a checklist. Of course you do. Step 1. Stop treating my husband like a passenger. The line almost made me smile. Then South Ridge reported a sharp gust increase. The eastern gap is closing, I said. How long? Maybe 15 minutes before the final turn becomes ugly. The operations pilot returned. Partial voice contact. Primary NAV unreliable. They can fly raw data. My pulse kicked harder. Find out what instruments are independent. The answer came back. Enough to hold attitude and heading. Not enough to navigate confidently through worsening terrain. Tower can vector them, Grant said. Tower is saturated. He understood. You can. I stepped back from the table. My hands went cold. Daniel's voice returned from the recording. Your call, Northstar. Evidence had changed what I believed about the past. My body had not caught up. Grant lowered his voice. You do not have to take this. If I don't, operations finds someone else. Who? His silence answered. Someone qualified might become available. Someone with this exact weather picture might not. Competence had become obligation faster than I wanted. Grant moved closer without touching me. Helping because you choose to is not the same as being trapped because you can. It will feel the same if this goes wrong. Probably. That's not comforting. You told me not to lie. The operations line crackled. We're losing them on relay. If Northstar is available, Tower wants him on coordination. Grant glanced at the headset beside the console and left it there. What do you want? Choice instead of management. I stared at the storm track. Knowing I had not failed Daniel had changed one thing I could not undo. Disappearing no longer felt morally neutral. Patch me to Tower. Headset. My hand shook once before I reached for it. Yes. He gave it to me without placing it over my ears or promising I would be fine. I put it on myself. Static and overlapping voices filled the frequency. Then a controller said, Northstar, medical charter weak, but readable. Stand by to assist. My heart pounded hard enough to make the old fear feel current. I pressed transmit anyway. Northstar standing by. The words did not feel like a return. Not yet. They felt like a decision. The controller's next transmission stripped away the last comfortable distance between helping and deciding. Northstar, Medflight 9 reports unreliable standby heading. Captain requests vector recommendation. On the display, the eastern gap had narrowed between rising terrain and the edge of the storm. The western option looked cleaner on radar, but would put the aircraft behind Granite Ridge with weaker communications. Neither choice was good anymore. Last verified position and fuel, I said. Grant related. Enough reserve to reach Pine Ridge. Not enough to wander around waiting for certainty. Then South Ridge dropped off the weather network. Lightning had taken out our best real-time wind source on the eastern side. The medical charter came through broken by static. Northstar, this is Medflight 9. Terrain warnings intermittent. Need a recommendation. The captain sounded controlled. Professionals did not use the word need unless options were disappearing. Maintain present heading. Do not descend yet. Grant studied the map. Evan, if they don't turn soon, the east corridor closes. I know. Regional is going to push them west. Almost on cue, the controller cut in. Northstar, Regional Operations recommends western diversion. Request concurrence. Procedure had become a way to assign the pressure. If I agreed, the west route became my recommendation. If I disagreed, I owned the alternative. The old cockpit replayed itself in my body. Systems degrading, a voice asking for my call. The knowledge that afterward one result would become the story of what I should have done. Grant saw me freeze. Evan, don't tell me it'll be fine. I wasn't going to. The radio crackled. Northstar, recommendation required. Grant's hand moved toward the console and stopped. I can tell them to transfer this to regional command, he said. You can walk away. The offer hurt precisely because it was real. He would not punish me for taking it. I looked at the map again. Walking away would not remove the decision. It would only move it to someone with less information. No, what? Don't transfer it. I keyed the mic. Medflight 9, Northstar. Reject western diversion. Turn east now and maintain altitude. I'll give you the final approach correction once you clear Granite. The captain responded immediately. Turning east. We trust your vector. My stomach dropped at the word trust. The aircraft icon moved toward the gap. Seconds later, the latest wind estimate came in stronger than projected. Grant leaned toward the display. That narrows your turn. Then they don't fly the published turn. I pulled up the terrain profile and traced a shallower arc toward Pine Ridge. It was ugly. It was possible. Tower. Reserve runway 31 for Medflight 9 and suspend departures. The controller hesitated, then acknowledged. Grant looked at me. There was no protector/passenger dynamic left in his expression. Only one pilot recognizing another making a consequential call. What do you need? Fuel every 2 minutes. And stop me if I miss something. Done. Partnership, finally. Shared vigilance without blind faith or stolen authority. Medflight 9's signal weakened as they entered the gap. For almost a minute, we had only broken position reports. Then the captain returned. Northstar, terrain intermittent. One usable localizer. I watched the turn window approach. Too early, and the wind pushed them toward the ridge. Too late, and they overshot the runway environment. Grant saw the same conflict. I'm getting a later turn from the wind. Terrain says earlier. He checked again. For one moment, our relationship could have snapped back to its old shape. Grant had more recent cockpit time. He had every reason to say, I'm taking this. Instead, he looked at me. I trust your read. My chest tightened. The controller came through. Northstar, Medflight 9 requests final turn instruction. The old fear screamed for certainty that did not exist. Daniel's voice returned, but now the recording came with it. I'm with you. Good call. Grant stood beside me, not shielding me from the decision and not abandoning me to it. Evan, he said quietly. I looked at him. He did not give me an answer. Your call. I keyed the mic. Medflight 9, Northstar. Begin the turn now. Shallow bank. Hold altitude until I give you descent. The captain read it back. The aircraft icon began to arc across the terrain display, drifting harder than expected under the crosswind. Grant saw it. They're getting carried north. I know. The regional controller came over coordination. Recommend immediate descent for runway capture. I looked at the profile. Too early. They would trade. Terrain clearance for a signal they did not fully trust. Negative descent. A pause followed. Northstar, confirm rejecting regional recommendation. Confirmed. Grant said nothing. His silence gave me room instead of doubt. Medflight 9 broke through again. Localizer intermittent. Terrain visual lost. My pulse slammed once. Stay with instruments. Maintain. I'll call descent. We're running out of room. The captain was not accusing me. He was giving me the truth. I gave him mine. I know. Hold what you have. Grant checked fuel. If they miss this approach, they probably don't get another full one. The last escape route vanished. No reset. No second try. I could feel Daniel's final flight trying to overwrite the present one, but the resemblance ended where my choice began. Back then, I had believed making the best call meant promising the best outcome. Now I understood the difference. The wind shifted slightly in our favor. Not much. Enough. Medflight 9, descend now. Stay shallow and let the localizer come to you. The captain read it back. For several seconds, nothing improved. Then his voice returned. Northstar, localizer alive. Do not chase it. Let it come to you. Grant's eyes flicked toward mine at the phrase. Years ago, I had told myself I needed certainty before I could ever make another call. Now the signal itself was imperfect, and I was telling another pilot not to overcorrect for it. Tower reported the runway environment ahead. Medflight 9, runway 12 o'clock, for miles. Static. Then, visual. We have it. My knees almost gave out. Almost. The danger was not over. They were high and fighting the crosswind. Grant monitored the descent beside me. They're still high. I checked runway length and speed. They have room. I keyed the mic. Medflight 9, you are high but stable. Do not dive for the threshold. Land long. You have runway. Copy. Landing long. The final call was not dramatic or perfect, only the safest decision available. The aircraft disappeared from our tracking display below radar coverage. For 8 seconds, there was nothing. My body remembered every second after Daniel's silence and tried to turn those 8 into years. Grant did not touch me. He did not say it would be fine. He stood beside me and waited through the same uncertainty I had spent years running from. Then Pine Ridge Tower came over the line. Northstar, Medflight 9 is down. Aircraft stopped on runway. Emergency crews responding. All occupants accounted for. I closed my eyes. The relief hurt. Grant exhaled beside me, slow and unsteady. All occupants, he repeated. I nodded, but the words did not erase Daniel. I no longer needed them to. A minute later, the medical charter captain returned on frequency. Northstar, Medflight 9. Thank you. My hand rested on the transmit switch. You flew it. I gave you a corridor. You gave us a decision when we didn't have one. I looked at Grant. He was watching me without pride that turned me into a trophy, without fear that turned me into someone fragile. Just recognition. Glad you're down, I said. The channel quieted. Regional operations requested my identity confirmation for the incident record. For a second, the old instinct returned. Decline. Disappear. Let someone else carry the name. I pressed transmit. This is Evan Hayes. Call sign Northstar. Confirming operational assistance. Grant's expression changed almost imperceptibly. He understood what that cost me. The crisis had been resolved because I chose before knowing whether the outcome would forgive me. No one had rescued me from the decision. No one had guaranteed I was right. I had made the call anyway. Grant looked at the headset, then at me. Do you want me to take it? I shook my head. No, my voice was tired, but steady. Not yet. The first thing that changed after Medflight 9 landed was that nobody in the room called me a passenger. Before sunset, the review board restored temporary access to my archived professional record because my assistants had become part of a new incident file under my own name. Grant read the notice beside me and, in a way I would not have noticed a week earlier, left the decision untouched. Do you want it open? He asked. I looked at the headset still resting on the table. Yes. The record no longer felt like a verdict waiting to happen. Daniel was still dead. The old review still contained choices I wished I could revisit with information I had not possessed that night. But those facts now existed beside another one. Grief had never been proof that I should stop making decisions forever. The board's updated status was simple. No pilot error found. Legacy qualifications eligible for voluntary reassessment. Grant read the last word twice. Voluntary. You like that one? I'm developing an appreciation for it. 3 days later, we were home, and our marriage no longer fit the old shape. The harder conversation came before the easier routines had time to hide it. Grant stood at the kitchen island with both hands flat against the counter. I'm still hurt, he said. I know. Not because you were Northstar. I know. Because you let me build part of our marriage around a version of you that wasn't complete. I did not defend it. I was scared that if you saw all of it, you'd start asking me to become that man again. And instead I asked you to become smaller without knowing I was doing it. The truth stayed between us for a moment. You were trying to make me safe. That doesn't make the result harmless. I reached across the counter and took his hand. I don't need you to punish yourself for believing me. Good. I've been told I'm occasionally dramatic. By whom? An unreliable source with an archived call sign. I smiled, but the warmth did not erase the seriousness. I also don't know if I want to fly professionally again. Grant squeezed my hand once. Then that decision is yours. Better. I'm learning. 2 weeks later, I accepted one voluntary flight review session at Pine Ridge. Not a comeback. Not a job. One session. One choice. Grant came because I asked him to. The training aircraft was smaller than his jet and much less expensive, which he regarded with the respectful suspicion of a man and used to machines without custom upholstery. We ran the exterior checks together. At the cockpit door, he reached automatically for the checklist, stopped, and looked at me. Your call. The phrase still carried weight. It always would. But it no longer belonged only to Daniel's last flight or med-flight. 9's emergency. I took the checklist. We worked through it together. When we taxied toward the runway, Tower cleared us to hold short. Then the controller paused. Aircraft 72, confirm pilot identity. My hand rested on the transmit switch. Grant said nothing. No encouraging nod. No hand over mine. No attempt to make the moment easier than it was. He waited beside me. Evan Hayes, I said. Another pause. Then the controller's voice came back, professional and calm. Northstar recognized. Welcome back. My chest tightened, but I did not freeze. The call sign no longer sounded like the man I used to be reaching in to claim me. It sounded like something I could answer or leave unanswered. I looked at Grant. He was smiling, but there was no surprise in it now. No pride that turned me into a story he could tell about his extraordinary husband. Just trust. You ready? He asked. I looked down the runway. Daniel still mattered. The people from Med Flight 9 mattered. Fear still existed. So did competence. So did choice. I keyed the radio. Northstar ready for departure. Grant reached toward the next checklist item, caught himself, and waited. I smiled. Your turn.